Hello everyone, it's the Intrepid Wino here, aka James Scaresbrook, and I've got a slightly different Let's Taste for you this episode. You might have seen previous videos where I've tasted one, maybe two bottles, or I've done a couple of Let's Taste live. Thanks for those who have either watched the video or tuned in live. More coming, which is very exciting. But this time I am actually going to profile a brand, a winery, a winemaker. It's actually someone I met a few years ago. I was doing some research on Italian grape varieties in Australia, which took me over to South Australia. I visited some wineries in McLaren Vale, in the Barossa, and that's when I met Wayne Farquhar. He has, for many years, a commercial nursery. He was very involved with importing grape varieties, which he and many other people feel that are better suited for the Australian conditions, climates, soils, that kind of thing. Particularly grape varieties outside of France, and varieties that I discovered whilst I was travelling around Europe and was really excited about and thought had so much potential here in Australia. Varieties that are better suited to drier, slightly warmer growing conditions, less elevated, less sort of steep slopes, really. And so I had a walk around his commercial nursery and saw some varieties that I didn't even know were in Australia, which was really exciting. So at the time, he hadn't actually released any wines. I think he'd had maybe one or two vintages, and we tasted some wines out of the tank. So it's really exciting to see these wines finally in bottle under the Dell'Uva brand name, and they are hopefully. I haven't tried the wines at all. I've heard some good things. They're obviously, the first thing is that I'm really excited about seeing different varieties. As much as I love Shiraz, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Riesling, Cabernet, that kind of thing, there is a lot of it in Australia. In warmer climates, they can taste a little bit the same. Forgive me. There are lots of great ones, of course, but I really want to see more Italian varieties, Spanish varieties, even some Portuguese varieties, and so it's great. So I'm going to crack open some of these wines and share with you my impressions. So let's get straight into it. Firstly, this is a Nero d'Avola. On the label it says natural wine, 2014. This, I believe, was vinified in Amphora. So Nero d'Avola, if you are not aware, is a variety that is found in Sicily, probably the most planted indigenous red variety in Sicily, and you can get quite significantly different expressions of Nero d'Avola depending on where it's grown. It is one of those really malleable grape varieties I find. So let's have a look at this. All these wines are in the screw cap, which is exciting to see. It looks like quite high quality screw cap as well. Alright. Nice sort of garnet colour. Not super intense, so I don't think it's had a really serious maceration. At least not a hot one. It's clocking in at 14.5% alcohol. That's pretty standard for warm climate. Reds, you can set it a little bit higher. It's quite juicy. It's got a very kind of red wine aroma to it. But it has some nice kind of crunchy red fruit and earth characters. A little bit of kind of ruby, cassis as well. Let's taste. Very bright, very fresh, very light. Nice, clean expression. Good fruit. Alcohol, acidity, tannins, very well balanced. It's not a very extractive style. It does sort of retain its slightly Italian kind of varietal flair. It's definitely not trying to be made like an Australian red wine, or like a Shiraz or Cabernet, that kind of thing. I like it. It's very honest. It's definitely a little bit different to Sicilian Nero d'Avola, but it's very solid. I think it's lovely. Pretty good start. All right, let's move on. Second wine, Dolcetto. Dolcetto is a grape variety you find in the Piedmont region of Italy in the north. Most commonly, it's planted in Alba and Asti. These are relatively cool climate regions. They are slightly elevated. The hills in Alba and Asti are lovely, undulating. So there's a lot of opportunity with elevation and aspect. Dolcetto typically is the earlier ripening grape variety in that area as far as the reds. It typically is very light, very fresh, more aromatic in nature, very much on the front palate. It's generally sort of the earlier drinking wine in that area. Just going to give it a rinse. So again, Dolcetto has been in Australia for a while, but something that I'm a little bit confused about is that you typically find it in the warmer climate regions like the Barossa Valley. I kind of feel that that's not necessarily the ideal location for them. Not to say that they can't make good wines, but it's a less authentic expression of what Dolcetto has to offer. So I personally would like to see more Dolcetto in cooler climates, like the Adelaide Hills, King Valley, that kind of thing. This is a darker fruit note. Color-wise, it's a little bit darker. This, for me, has more of a Barossa kind of character than a Dolcetto character, I have to be honest. Yeah, it's black fruits, really. Quite vibrant, a little bit of floral in there as well. Let's taste. Yep, it's very solid, really yummy, mellow red wine. A little bit of wood in there, I think. That's coming through. It's a lovely wine. It's not particularly unique for me, and unfortunately it's not necessarily representing Dolcetto for me. Again, it's a lovely wine, but I would like to see Dolcetto in cooler climates, maybe a little bit more elevation. I think there should be more Dolcetto in Victoria, but again, it's nice, but it's not Dolcetto for me. All right. Next, Syrah. So again, this comes back to the colonial thing. Shiraz, of course, was introduced into Australia a long time ago and has a very, very big reputation. I think it's one of the few countries in the world where Syrah outnumbers Cabernet. But I understand that this is a more of a colonial selection thing, which is sort of why I believe he is calling it Syrah and not Shiraz. In Australia, the trend more recently has been to label wines as Shiraz or Syrah depending on the style. The Syrah wines usually come from a cooler climate. They're a little bit more aromatic in nature, spicy, peppery, lighter, whereas Shiraz is a little bit fuller. But this, I believe, is more a reference to clone, and it's more of a Northern Rhone clone, I believe. Having said that, this is quite dark in colour, inky. It's not as black as I've seen some Barossa Shiraz, but it is a very typical kind of colour you would see from Barossa Shiraz. Let's have a smell. Again, this is, dry grown, very concentrated, very dense, dark fruit. Very, very much in that plummy kind of Ribenery kind of fruit profile. Let's taste. '13. Yep. Mellow, soft, velvety kind of tannins, you know, lovely presence. It's not, it's not kind of as bombastic, it's not hugely oaky, it's not hugely kind of fruit bomby or big in the alcohol. It's coming in at 14.5, which is good, but it's not really distinguishing itself. It's an excellent example, and I think it's representative of Syrah in the Barossa from that 2013 vintage. Yeah, it's delicious. I'm sure, I don't think people are going to be disappointed with it, but it's, you know, it's interesting. All right, next up, Mencia. Mencia is a red variety you find in northern Spain, usually in Galicia, away from the coast. Typically it's planted on very steep slopes, like a lot of ancient indigenous Spanish varieties. It's, you know, often it's planted like bush vines, that kind of thing. But Mencia is sometimes referred to, it's kind of compared with, I guess it's almost like the Barolo of Spain, because it can be quite difficult and expensive to grow. And the wines are very tense, very tannic, very bright, but not sort of heavy like Tempranillo or Garnacha. I think Mencia is one of those varieties that has tremendous potential in particular regions in Australia. So let's have a look at it. It's got some nice colour to it. The colour of all these wines have been very consistent, very good. This is dark, but it's not as dense as that Syrah was. This is 2013 as well. So this is a little bit more closed, a little bit more complex, a little bit more brooding in a way. This for me is showing more of that red earth character. It's very, you know, it's very well composed. Let's taste. Wow. There's a lot going on in here. This is really yummy. I really like this. This shows that kind of savoury edge that I like in some Spanish grape varieties. It's got that kind of leatheriness without like it being aggressive. It's very, very subtle. It has a little bit of a meaty character, but then, you know, you've got that red, purpley fruit coming in as well. This is offering just enough for it to be quite compelling. I really like this. This is yum. That's a winner. All right, Primitivo. Now, it's possible that some of you might be familiar with a grape variety called Zinfandel. Zinfandel was famously brought in, or maybe not so famously, brought in by David Honan to Cape Mentel over in Western Australia in Murray River, because he, I believe, had studied or he'd spent some time in California and sort of fell in love with the Zinfandel variety there. So he brought it in, but it had a bit of an issue with ripening, where it goes through a process called, often referred to as hen and chicken, where you get uneven kind of ripening of the berries on a bunch, so only half of them will actually start to ripen and the other ones ripen later, so you have to leave them on the vine for much longer, and that can kind of contribute to quite ripe fruit, really big bombastic kind of characters, fruit bombs, which can typically be higher in alcohol. Primitivo is essentially the same grape variety, but it's the variety that ended up in the Puglia region of southern Italy, so essentially the heel of the boot that is Italy, which is one of the only flatter parts of Italy, and so it works really well. It's quite warm. It does really well in that dry kind of flat, warm condition, and hence I think this Primitivo, whereas the Zinfandel was brought in from California, the Primitivo here has been brought in from Italy, and it has evolved a little bit different, so it doesn't typically have that same issue of ripening, so you can actually harvest it a little bit earlier and get good fruit ripeness without it becoming massive. So I'm excited to try this. Primitivo for me is one of the most important varieties for the future in the Barossa Valley. Yeah, this is really classic of Primitivo. It has that kind of burnt red fruit, really generous kind of crushed purple flowers, but really earthy, really earthy. Let's taste. See, this is a good example of why I think that this kind of variety has so much potential, particularly in the Barossa Valley, because as far as the fruit, as far as the presence, it delivers exactly what a lot of people like. You know, really lovely, full, generous, juicy, dark fruits on the palate. You know, it's got that kind of plumminess to it as well, but it doesn't have that huge amount of alcohol, really over the top kind of fruit, and definitely doesn't have kind of oak to kind of balance out those big tannins. It's a really delicious wine. It's not trying to be anything more than that, which is what's really exciting about it. It's also coming in only 14% alcohol, is a really fantastic food option, but just a crowd-pleasing wine. Kudos. This is a great example of Primitivo. I think it's great. All right, last wine. I've left this to last because my assumption is that it's going to be a little bit more tannic. It's made from Aglianico. Aglianico is a grape variety that you also find in the south, but in different parts. So Basilicata, which is the top of the that little kind of little part of the Mediterranean that is between the boot and the heel, but also Campania, not too far from Naples. Aglianico is the red variety, really. It's considered to be one of the most tannic varieties, particularly in Italy, and yet you can get very different expressions of Aglianico. Typically it's quite big and powerful, but often it can be very lithe and elegant and quite silky. Aglianico, particularly Aglianico del Vulture in Basilicata, is often referred to as the Barolo of the South because it has really quite intense tannins and powerful expression, but is still quite elegant. So I'm interested to see how Wayne has expressed his Aglianico, considering that it is coming from probably a little bit warmer climate and a flatter kind of land than you would typically see in where it's typically grown in Italy. So what's making me quite excited about this is it's not really super intense. It has a lighter color. It's more red than dark, red than black, and it's quite light. It's not really intense. Wow, this is really interesting. It's very floral, very rose, violets kind of aromas. Kind of almost candied red fruits, like red skins, raspberries, that kind of thing. But it's very inviting. Let's taste. You feel that tannin. It's quite pronounced. It really fills the mouth, but it's not heavy. It sort of sits on the palate rather than being, you know, really weighing you down in the mouth. That's a really interesting expression of aglianico. I like that. That I think you can compare that quite comfortably with Italian examples. You know, very solid Italian examples. I think it'd be interesting to sort of see how it evolves. I would like to see that grown maybe somewhere with a little bit more sort of elevation and aspect. But that is nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. I probably need to try some more aglianico wines from Australia. Probably some more Primitivo wines. I think, yeah, for me, these three are big winners. The Nero d'Avola, it's good. It's not amazing. I think these two probably, it's more a reflection of maybe my tastes, but also I think where they're grown. I don't think that they're necessarily ideal in the Barossa, but again, it's my taste. All I'm sharing with you guys is my perceptions and my taste. I'm not telling you that I'm right and like that. It's just how I feel about it. But yeah, these three excite me quite a lot, and I'd like to sort of see more of that planted in Australia. But guys, if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like and a comment, and hopefully you'll be able to find more of these wines in the future. I recommend them. If you want to subscribe to my channel, that would be fantastic. You can find more videos just like this under the Let's Taste playlist. Yeah, no, I hope to catch up with you soon. Of course, Monday the 17th of August, 6 PM is the next Let's Taste Live with Gary Mills from Jamsheet. I hope you will join me. But until next time, cheers.